Mm. What's good, word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, back with the live show. First one in a minute, but I did want to chat about the New York Jets coaching staff. We have an official list in front of us, which we'll pull up and kind of run through at the moment. But things are very interesting here, right? I think high level wise, when you look at it, you say the defense is, of course, much better off than the offense is. And that's concerning, right? It's the same issue that's plagued Robert Saleh, same issue that's plagued Todd Bowles, same issue that's plagued Rex Ryan. The list goes on and on and on, right? So we'll get into a lot of the inner workings with this. There's a ton of new names that we haven't necessarily seen, mostly as offensive assistants, etc. But all in all, let's try to get a feel for what we're expecting to look at here. Now, one of the things I do want to start this entire conversation off with is Aaron Glenn on the surface level looks like he's taken all the appropriate steps to try and create a strong staff, right? On both sides of the ball. Defensively, I think we always were going to have the understanding that he had a better chance of acquiring some more reputable names, more consistent, experienced guys to really help craft the vision that he wants to see for the defense. Offensively, it was going to be a struggle, and we have to start with that, right? Aaron Glenn, by nature, regardless of if he can coach or speak to both sides of the ball, he's not an offensive-minded guy by nature, right? So you have to start off with that. Offensive coordinators are going to look at him. You're going to have to figure out, looking at the status of the roster, looking at the state of the team, understanding it's a rebuild. You're hearing all of the Woody Johnson drama, online. And so I don't see this being a very attractive position, right? I think if you're an OC, a head coach, it was a little bit of an easier sell. You have an offensive line that's rebuilt. You have a wide receiver one. You have a top 10 draft pick. And while it's not a offensive heavy draft at the top, you have options to help facilitate, a rebuild for yourself on that side of the ball. And at least having 4 of the 5 trench spots figured out and maybe a key backup piece or two is a great starting point, and more so than what I think you'd find in many other situations. With that said, quarterback is widely and hugely unknown, right? Obviously, we have the Aaron Rodgers decision in play now, but prior to that, did you want to have to be forced to work with an Aaron Rodgers? And two, what is really going to be the plan forward, right? If you are in love with one of the quarterbacks in the draft, one of the top 2 guys, generally regarded, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, great. But then now, what are you willing to sacrifice to go up and get one of those guys, right? It's pretty unlikely anybody drops. The next pathway ends up being, do you fall in love with maybe the second tier or maybe a guy that continues to move up as the offseason cycle goes, right? And the name that jumps to the front of my mind is Jackson Dart. I think that's a name that plenty of people are going to fall in love with. In any event, I think you continue to hear from a ton of analysts, right? Even Cam Ward, the consensus top quarterback in this draft, is at best a late first rounder, a early second rounder in most of the other drafts that have legit quarterbacks to go round 1. These are guys that, on top 50 big boards generally are ranked numbers 28 through 40 in some level, right? So you don't have a strong quarterback class. You have a ton of developmental options. One of the key indicators for me with Aaron Glenn that he announced, and I want to say it was some of the interviews right after his introductory press conference, right? What does he look for in a quarterback? The answer was simple. He wants a winner. There's a lot of ways to look at that. You can look at the quarterbacks that have won the majority of their games at the college football level. You can look at it as the traits. And if you look throughout the NFL, there's plenty of guys that you can certainly win with. Plenty of guys that don't have a standout trait. They don't have top tier arm strength. They don't even have the ability to throw from a ton of different platforms. They don't have difference making speed or agility or elusiveness, and they're finding ways to win. And the guy that I look at the most is Tua Tagovailoa, right? Not only is he a lefty, which throws a ton of things out of whack, he has all of those same elements. Doesn't have the best speed, doesn't have the best quickness, not overly elusive. He's in the AFC East, which generally had stronger quarterback play when you're looking at the Bills specifically, and at least for a portion of time with Brady, of course, the Patriots. And then, of course, you're talking about the cold weather game syndrome and stuff. They found ways to win with him. So I look at a guy like Dylan Gabriel, for example, still did a video before highlighting what could make him a decent option for us. And that was way before Aaron Glenn even coming in, right? So maybe they go off tilt here, right? And they go and they look to target a guy that they say, here are traits I can win with within this organization. And you don't really have to look too much further than the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff was a guy that was all set to be a bust in the NFL. And they took a look at him. They said, okay, he can perform playing play action, right? He has the ability to go out there and dissect the defense if he's given the time. So they gave him a strong offensive line. They gave him, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, fantastic fantasy receiver. I wouldn't necessarily say many people count him like their top 5 in the NFL per se, but maybe just outside of that ranking. But there's ways to win. Super strong run game. Obviously, Aaron Glenn built up the defense. So when you look at the formula with the Lions, you start to look at what can the Jets easily duplicate on our side, right? Which would be a defense that is probably a couple pieces away from being able to go out there and at least put up consistent, competitive, respectable performances again. You have Breece Hall, you have your Braylon Allen for your Lightning Thunder combination. You have most of your offensive line figured out. You have your elite receiver. You need to add a couple pieces there. Get you a plug-and-play quarterback, right? One of the strongest pointers that I try to keep out there for people is there's no guarantee that Aaron Glenn will survive and make it to a year or two, right? So not to say you have to make all of these short, nearsighted decisions in free agency in the draft, but something to consider is he may not have the luxury of waiting until the 2026 draft to get his quarterback, right? He may be out of there ASAP, and maybe they look to promote Tanner Engstrand or whatever craziness happens from there, right? So some things to keep in mind, but we'll dive into the coaching staff here in a bit. Wild Wave, what's the good word, my guy? It's been a minute. I know I don't do live streams really a ton at all. And realistically, I'm going to start getting some collaborations going there. But appreciate you, my guy. I know you've been supporting me pretty close to the get-go here. So Harvey A, what's good, my guy? I believe you may be relatively new to the channel. Appreciate the support. Definitely let's go Jets. I'm super hyped for this offseason. As restricted as we may be from like a free agency standpoint and stuff, I'm still very intrigued by what Aaron Glenn may be able to offer in terms of bringing in guys that maybe are, publicly supposed to be out of our capability to attain, right? And we've seen it with Robert Saleh. Obviously, everybody in the league was going crazy about his prospects of becoming head coach when he landed the title for the Jets. And you've seen after the first year, especially, we started being able to get these guys like DJ Reed and, you were picking up the smaller guys to develop, but we were able to start capturing some free agents that maybe we wouldn't have been able to get before, right? Your Tyler Conklins, your Tyron Smiths, your Morgan Moses, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, man. Actually was planning on tapping in with Gino or Italy again by the end of this week, just to kind of touch bases. I don't know when or if we'll really ever get the show kicked off again, but I definitely plan on touching back in with my boy Gunny, seeing if we can, get a one-off situation going at the very least. Yeah, I appreciate it, my man. Smaller channel, all that good stuff, doing it when I can. So the support's greatly appreciated, obviously. With that said, I will go ahead and drop the link in here as well for anybody that wants to jump on as we dive into this coaching staff and kind of share their thoughts, etc., on what's happening. But let me find the actual images here again for what our new coaching staff is going to look like. So bear with me for a moment. I had these up and they disappeared on me. All right, so I have one here. Also, by the way, let me know what your guys' early takes are, if you have any right now, in terms of what you've seen for the coaching staff. It's intriguing. It's intriguing to say the least. All right, so I have this one in front of me. This is what we will start off with. Let me go ahead and share. Let me see if this will pull up. All right, so defensive and special team staff. This is where we will kick things off. We have Chris Harris at the top, our defensive backs pass game coordinator, right? And obviously above this, I don't know why they didn't include Steve Wilkes, for example. You don't see Chris Banjo here either, but Steve Wilkes being our DC, Chris Banjo being our special teams coordinator. Oh, sorry. Hold on. I have this pulled up with a better view for you guys. Boom. There we go. So Steve Wilkes, Chris Banjo, not shown. Steve Wilkes, I think, is it's a plus, right? I think ultimately it was a guy that I was concerned about having experience for the sake of having experience, right? But when you put it in perspective, Aaron Glenn, we know he wants to do the global CEO approach type stuff, right? One of the things that's going to help allow him to do that is not needing to hold the hand of a defensive coordinator that needs to figure out what does it look like to not just have to talk to a position group, but talk to an entire team of men, right? At least on the defensive side of the ball. You're talking, 30, 40, maybe 50 plus people over the course of the offseason. Also needing to keep in mind guys that are going to be more special team focused, that needs to develop some kind of skills to see the defensive side of the field. And so there's going to be a lot that goes into that, right? How do you put that program together? What does it look like? How is that individual, that DC, going to work with the athletic and performance department to craft these plans for players that are coming back from injuries, or just guys that you think will be able to take that second leap? Maybe some guys that are falling off the wagon that you really need to get brought back in. There's a lot of different things that are going to go into that we don't really consider, right? The behind the scenes, the true leadership style stuff. Steve Wilkes is going to have that in spades. He's going to hit it off without an issue, right? And that's exactly what he needs. You also add into the fact, and I touched on this before as I've kind of gone through the coaching staff and did a couple of deep dives here. Steve Wilkes isn't a slouch, right? He's had a pair of top 5, I believe, maybe top 10 defensive performances where he's been the main guy, the defensive coordinator or the interim head coach or the head coach. And then he has a specialty in the secondary ranks, right? So when you look at your Sauce Gardner, who's kind of, and we say falling off the wagon, right? But he still put up, top 10 to top 15 cornerback numbers. So from a guy that you're talking about leading the league or being near the top, a top 3 guy in most of those categories, we really are splitting hairs here about how bad he really was. He's still a guy that 31 other teams would, sell probably half of their draft stock for to get on their roster. So I assume we'll see a bounce back. Aaron Glenn in his ear, Steve Wilkes in his ear, 2 guys that are really mastered being able to develop guys in the secondary, huge plus. I look at one of my favorites from the draft last year in Quantez Stiggers, a guy that, I'd feel really good about. If you want to take some dart throws in the safety room, right? One that probably may potentially not have a single familiar name next year. Ashton Davis was always the hyper athletic guy that from a mental standpoint just never really was able to marry his game up. But considering he has those traits, he could always be primed to bounce back, right? You could make the same argument for Tony Adams, but I would imagine you'll start to see some significant investments here and not us relying on mid-tier or UDFA caliber guys to make up the back end of the defense, right? Not saying we'll go out, and I know the favorite pick in round 2, for example, is Xavier Watts. Would love to still have him, but not saying we need to invest the day 1 and day 2, round 2 pick in that room. But it's not going to be a forgotten thought at this point in time, right? Harvey, Jake Asman, boy Green fan, now fan of yours. Much appreciated. Yeah, I know Jake Asman's been going crazy over the last year or two, and I've linked up with Boy Green a couple of times. He's pretty dope. I'll probably look back into trying to get on his morning show again at some point or host him over here. I just got to figure out scheduling wise what that looks like. Gator, my boy, what's good? It's been a long time. Hey, buddy, good to see you. What are your thoughts on trading for Kyler Murray, assuming Arizona is willing? And who would be your top 3 QB free agents? For those that don't know, by the way, Gators fire. He supports, I would imagine, every Jets content creator possible if he set his eyes on them. And if you watched any of the videos, the intro was actually crafted by Gators. So appreciate you, my boy. Big ups. As far as the question, Kyler Murray. The issue with him, I would say, is there's the whole problem about when he earned his secondary contract. I don't even know how this happens, right? If you have this many concerns. When he got his secondary contract, there was a ton of weird stipulations, like he needed to do 20 hours of game study, film study a week. Couldn't play Madden maybe over certain hours a day. Like just a bunch of really crazy stuff that you wouldn't imagine you'd have to, a grown man over 21 plus years old have to stipulate for him, right? And I know there's other weird stuff for other players, like let's take Garrett Wilson, for example. If he gets a secondary contract, maybe there's a requirement in there that he doesn't play basketball in his free time or whatever, right? Those things are a little bit more common. That's kind of injury risk prevention. But from a mental standpoint, a mental makeup standpoint, from a really common sense and just grown man perspective, I wouldn't trust Kyler Murray whatsoever. I think he's a guy you can clearly win with, even with his limitations, right? I think he is the better version of what you'd see out of Bryce Young, for example. But I wouldn't touch him. I wouldn't touch him at all. Not saying that he causes many issues. I think he'd actually be a lesser headache than Aaron Rodgers. And he also seems like he's really turned the corner here a bit for himself. But I don't know. He's a guy that I feel like is a little bit more of a slippery slope there. But I do love it, right? Obviously, he's able to go off schedule and just go nuts. But considering that, and I know it was maybe a little bit more of a down year for Marvin Harrison Jr., but he has a Trey McBride. He has Marvin Harrison. I'm forgetting the other receiver on this team that really does well. He just can't stay healthy, but he has a running game with James Conner and stuff over there, and they've never really pieced it together. And even though Cliff Kingsbury might not be the same guy he was with the Cardinals that he is with the Commanders, he was still a brilliant offensive mind, and they just never really took off the way that I would want to see it. So knowing that there may be a step back with this coaching staff, at least in the first year or two, it doesn't get me excited. Top 3 quarterback free agents. I don't know. It's tough. I haven't paid a ton into free agency, right, in terms of who may or may not be available. But I know there's going to be names out there like Jameis Winston, Jacoby Brissett. I will look at a list real quick and actually tell you what some of my quick thoughts are. Let me go and pull one up. So without there being an official list, available free agent quarterbacks. So Sam, Zach, Trey Lance, Brissett, Heineke, Marcus Mariota, Drew Lock. Okay, so if I'm looking at a name here, and just in the interest of staying on task of this coaching staff, which we'll get back to, if I'm looking at these free agent quarterbacks, I would probably say I was a big Trey Lance fan when he came out, but obviously I think things have devolved for himself a little bit. But I would probably still say Jacoby Brissett is probably number 2, just in favor of a guy that may be slightly younger with some stuff that you can unlock still in Drew Lock. So I would probably say Drew Lock, Jacoby Brissett. And then I would, do I want to? I would maybe look at a dart throw for a guy like Carson Wentz, just considering I think you still need some level of a veteran in there as opposed to maybe a Justin Fields. But it really just depends on how much of the resources do they want to develop and invest into trying to develop whoever it is they pour in, right? If it's a veteran, you're not really worried about much. You're trying to focus on the consistency and level of play while you develop the backup. But if you get a guy like Justin Fields, you're going to have the background noise, the fans obviously involving, and because he still has that kind of franchise quarterback allure, I could see that taking away a lot. So I would probably say Jacoby Brissett, Drew Lock, and then somebody like a Carson Wentz will probably round out my top three. Good question. We need all phases working together. I see this as a reset, so I can't. Yeah, I think playoffs is crazy to think about for us. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but you would have to imagine that most of the coaching staff got solutions and figured things out quickly. You would have to imagine that a quarterback has exceeded their expectations in terms of level of play. And you probably are talking about some level of, a breakout type performance from like a Breece Hall, somebody else other than Garrett Wilson, something like that, right? And then, of course, all of the defensive stars staying at or exceeding the level that we've seen from them. Gator got some fans in the building. Danger, my guy. What's the good word? I'm still going to link with you. I forgot. I got to find your email or whatever it was. I will shoot you my number at some point just to make it easier to try to sync up here. Murray can't see over the. Yeah, we can't forget Joe Tippmann, 6'6". I am a smaller guy, right? I was more of a DB, running back. I did cornerback, safety, stuff like that when I did play football. I did have the ability to play QB, and the school that I went to just had some genetic freaks. So I was like 5'7" or something before my final growth spurt when I was trying to play around there. There's ways to get around that. It's not as black as white as this guy's Empire State Building. I mean, I'm a little solo apartment here. Passing lanes that you could create, different things like that, but it is absolutely still a hindrance. I thought about Murray behind Tippmann yesterday and looked it up. His Arizona center was 6'5". Sucks that he's never hit 4 key yards, so Namath will be safe for a while. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of possibility, though, that Kyler Murray could come and probably put up a better season than what we saw to Aaron Rodgers. Maybe not from an efficiency standpoint. I don't see him doing, I think Aaron Rodgers went, 28 and I think I'm giving him too much credit. Maybe 28 and 10, but maybe the number's closer to 28 and 14. But I could see him probably going over 4K or at least in a combination of yardage. I could see him doing probably like 3,500 and then doing like 700 yards on the ground or something crazy like that, right? My only concern with this coaching staff is Jeff Blasco as tight end coach. Has he ever coached tight ends before? They have Blasco at tight ends and high ends. Yeah, so this is really funny because when I looked at the list late last night, I was too tired to really dive into a ton. Jeff Blasco has coached tight ends at the collegiate level, and I can't remember who it is. I will look it up real quick. I want to say it was Kansas State for 3 years. Where is it? Yeah. Kansas State from 2012 to 2014, tight ends coach. And then after that, he's moving to the offensive line. So this was one of the things I was going to bring up with the offensive staff because the assembly of it is a little bit weird, right? Steve Hyden has he's worked with Zach Ertz. He's worked with TJ Hawkinson. And I think there was a third name that I'm forgetting about that was a rookie with the Cards at the time that he helped develop. And I think he set a record for most touchdowns by a rookie tight end in the game or something. But nonetheless, he's done an excellent job of not just crafting the all-star type guys, but he's also done a good job just elevating the entire level of the room. 1 year of O-line experience, though, right? Whereas with a guy like Jeff Blasco, tons of O-line experience, minimal tight ends, and I can't think of anybody from those 3 years of the Kansas teams that really, just excelled or did anything crazy. So I don't know. I feel like if I'm looking at it, the plan of thought I would imagine is that Aaron Glenn wanted a little bit of diversity in terms of the experience, right? Guys that have maybe touched one or two positions with at least a year or two in it, and he can kind of cross-pollinate and lean on certain guys. I don't think it's the way you necessarily want to build a coaching staff, but when Jeff Blasco maybe is looking at a guy like, let's say, Zach Kuntz, random example, right? 10 RAS score, absolute freak, a guy that you think that you could maybe turn into something. Jeff Blasco may have an idea about how he can get him rapidly improved, right? A drastic year one turnaround to where we can actually make him rosterable. Steve Hyden may look at that plan and say, here's where you're going astray. I'm not going to hold your hand for it, but here's how you should go about developing it. Here's the type of drills he needs to get into. Here's the markers or indicators we need to see by preseason. And maybe that's kind of the plan in play, right? There's a checks and balances system for each of the coaches that they can go to and rely on throughout that coaching staff. But we'll have to see how it plays out. I'm sure there is maybe a better understanding of kind of how he's assembling some of these guys. And again, we also can't really forget that it's not going to be a favorable destination, right? It's going to be really tough. Offensive line coach might have been our best chance of hiring some kind of top tier guy just because we had a lot of the positions solidified. And the guys that are there, right, are guys that could be top caliber players at their position. But it's a question mark, right? And maybe the initial plan was see who you can acquire that you consider the best of the best that was willing to take the job, and then maybe you reshuffle the titles or something around later. But I don't know. Justin Fields or Kirk Cousins, I would 100% go Justin Fields. Not even a conversation. Kirk Cousins is having the same. Kirk Cousins is revisiting this whole Aaron Rodgers saga with just a lesser talent, right? And it's also needless to say, he's never really won anything when it really mattered. So he's just been a savant with his agent at racking up crazy checks. 26 watch it. Appreciate you, my boy. It's a losing year to get top quarterback from college. It's a losing year. Okay, so if I understand it correctly, basically we're just asking, is this a good year where you can maybe find a gem, right? And I do think so. Franchise quarterback is a much different conversation to me than a quarterback that you can win with. Alex Smith, I think to maybe 49ers fans, was a franchise quarterback. On the outside looking in, I don't think a ton of people would share that same mentality, but he was a quarterback that you could win with. If you had the infrastructure in place, not to say that he would maximize the roster, but he was a quarterback that was going to make sure that you were performing 9 times out of 10 to the level of talent you assembled. That is kind of where I envision maybe we have to go early, right? Which is why I mentioned Dylan Gabriel as maybe an underrated target that we may look to get that wouldn't require us hopefully investing a day 2 pick in, right? Kirk isn't a bad option considering that. I'm good. Kirk Cousins could come to us free, or he could offer to pay us for 3 years. I wouldn't want anything to do with him. I'm just really that hard pressed about not going with another guy coming off a significant injury that we've already seen the talent kind of declining for. I'm good. Question: if you are 100% not going to win a Super Bowl in 2025, DKB, might I ask you what you feel like the optimum number of wins would be, knowing that would help me to determine which quarterback to target? Interesting question. I don't think anybody's ever really phrased it in this way, right? So I'm going to try not to give a roundabout answer here. If I look at the schedule, and let me just see what we have again for 2025. So obviously we have our division opponents. So actually, I don't like the way that version looks. I would say we still can be competitive versus the Patriots. I would say We probably could be fairly competitive with the Dolphins. The Bills is where things really still kind of get out of hand. So let's just say we split. That's 2 games for division opponents, whether it's a sweep of the Patriots or maybe we still went away from the Dolphins, kind of depending on what they look like next year, right? Then you have the Steelers, which as just a more established team, I would imagine their quarterback situation improves and stuff. Probably a L. I think we could get one from the Browns. I don't trust us against the Broncos. I don't trust us against the Cowboys. Depending on what Penix looks like, I think we might be able to get one off of them. Not only familiarity with Jeff Ulbrich going over there, but of course, they're still trying to develop and establish their identity and get all those things in play as well. I like the way Bryce Young developed last year. They could be sneaky good, but I say we could probably get one from them, right? So we're already at 2, 3, maybe 5 wins there. And then let's say the only other team out of the next group, which will be the Ravens, Bengals, Jags, Bucks, Saints, will probably be the Saints. So I would say if you're looking somewhere between 4 to 6 wins, that's probably the most realistic. And I would be okay with that. What I would be looking more so too is what has been the level of play over the course of that season, right? Let's say we're putting up 23 points on average. Weird number, I know, but I'm just throwing it out there. Let's say we average 23 points a game. Let's say our defense is a top 15 unit and we can keep them in the 10 to 15 range, right? If we aren't leading the league in penalties, if we are seeing that we did have a focus or we had an efficient, effective ground game, we had a quarterback that I would be good with a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, right? 20 touchdowns or 25 touchdowns, 12, 13 interceptions, something that I can work with, right? I want to see that we actually have strong game plans. I want Garrett Wilson consistently dominating. I want Breece Hall consistently a focal point, or you're seeing games, much like you saw with the Lions, right? You're seeing games where Breece Hall is consistently effective and maybe Braylon Allen is dominating or vice versa. I would be good with that, right? Ultimately, I want us to stop shooting ourselves in the foot. I want a better turnover ratio. I don't want us having to play behind the 8 ball, right? I want competitive games by halftime. I would look at those as the better indicator of where we're going, as opposed to necessarily how the win-loss ratios may fall out, because I can't remember how the stat went, but we were pretty terrible in 1-score games, right? We had no way to figure out how to win, overcome those, anything of that nature. And I see that being a big problem. So if we suddenly turn into the Vikings in 2022, 2023, where they were like 15-1 in 1-score games or something, that'd be a whole different story. But I would look at things like that as a strong indicator of where we would want to go with the quarterback. Dark Soldier, what's the good word, my boy? The good thing with Blasco and Hayden is that the blocking schemes for tight ends and O-line are similar, but can Blasco teach tight end routes and such? But you're right, AG has a plan to get. Yeah, it's just kind of what I'm spitballing, right? I could see what the plan in play for the coaching staff he was able to get on the offensive side of the ball may be. Still question marks for sure. But tight end routes, I'm not really as concerned about, right? When you look at a guy like Greg Kittle, or you look at a guy like Zach Ertz, or you look at a guy like, I'm trying to think who are some of the other blocking tight ends in the league that I like. You could look at a Nick Van Nett, for example, that I kind of talked about as a potential free agent target. The guys that can block and then offer some level of receiving ability, right? Let's just say they're only getting 300 to 400 yards in the season. There's always potential for there to be a spike or for them to continue to progress there, right? Understanding the receiving component of being a tight end, I think, is much easier than it is to understand the blocking component, right? You have to have the mindset. You have to have the physicality. You actually have to have the physical stature in many situations to be able to go out there and perform that as an adequate level. And I think you can get away with a guy that is excels in blocking and maybe is okay as a receiver. Maybe that's his inability to get off the line of scrimmage easily. Maybe it's because he's, just average speed or quickness. Maybe it's because he doesn't fully understand how to leverage his body and release packages and route running concepts and stuff like that, right? That's easier to put together than a guy that can't block whatsoever. Like, I could easily see, for example, and I'll pull up Zach Kuntz again just because he's the freak of nature. I could see him somehow, let's say he works, I don't even want to say that. Let's say injuries happen. He finds himself in a tight end 2 role for some reason. It would be easier for me to think that he can go out there and put up some kind of season that makes us say, wow, maybe we need to extend this guy as a receiver, as opposed to him going out there, blocking his tail off, throwing everybody by surprise, and then also being a great receiver, My other problem with the coaching staff is Charles London. I don't know enough about his overall track record as QB coach, but Scott Turner and Tanner Ingstring, I think, can level that out. So I did do a video for him if you want to check that out. I am actually okay with Charles London. He hasn't done anything extraordinary, but he's been involved with Geno Smith. He's been involved with what was the other destination he was with? Falcons QB. I want to keep saying Arthur Smith so bad, but he was with Matt Ryan, right? And then he was a part of Desmond Ridder over there, and I think there's a fourth quarterback that I'm forgetting. Nobody that was spectacular, but the rookie guys seem to have gotten reasonably better under him. Matt Ryan still looked like a veteran that wasn't falling off a cliff under his guidance. And Geno Smith, under his tutelage, did better than he did. I forget the name of the Panthers head coach currently. He didn't do as well as he did under him. And I can't remember the other coordinator. But the moral of the story, or the point I'm trying to make here, is Charles London, at worst, seems like a serviceable QB coach that can get guys' fundamentals on track. And at best, maybe he can give you maybe like a Pro Bowl alternate type guy, just depending on what kind of traits your quarterback is working with. Because Geno Smith, Matt Ryan, Desmond Ridder, those are all kind of distinctly different quarterbacks that have a play style and an ability to actually go out there and play. The only real kind of maybe overlap there, in my opinion, is that each guy at least has outside of Matt Ryan, I guess that wouldn't be the complete overlap, but each guy had the ability to at least make plays with his feet. Matt Ryan obviously wasn't anything close to a dual threat quarterback, but if things broke down and he actually went through all of his progressions and couldn't buy more time and stuff, he could go out there and make things work. James Baker, what's the good word, boss? Glad to see you in here. Major support from him. That's one of my guys. 100% no to Kirk. He already turned. Yeah. Great point. Great point, Soja. I will never forget the fact that he used us to get to the Vikings. I absolutely hate that has been a trend for the Jets. Absolute no. I'm at work. I'll be calling. Thanks for. Yeah, no problem, my guy. I got you. Who do you think Darren Muji hires for assistant GM? I like Terrence Gray. Great question. I would actually have to look at this. I have no idea what we're looking at. And when he hired, John Patton, whatever the nephew was for George Patton, for our co-director, a guy that was an area scout, national scout, that's a bump up a few levels. So I don't even think I can look at like the Panthers organization over the last 12 years he's been with them and say, this seems like a guy with a reasonable resume, because he may just pick whoever he feels like he's worked with best, excuse me, and whoever's had a relatively successful stint in whatever role they've been in, right? And it was even hard to highlight stuff with Patton in terms of what he's been really successful at, because you don't know really much of anything about any of these national or area scout guys. So I would have to look at that. That may be an interesting video if I can dig up some stuff, but we'll have to see. If anybody else knows any other names, let me know. I don't know if he'd go outside of his area of comfort even, right? Because he's mostly been with the Broncos. And then before that, I think it was him, his playing career and then him being in college and stuff, right? So not a ton of outward exposure. If anything, maybe he relies on Rick Spielman. Maybe he relies on what Aaron Glenn has seen from his time as a scouter and being in the front office. Couldn't agree more. Same thing with Belichick. He had his chance, then went to come to the Jets when no one wanted him yet. If anything, I think the interest that he had with us was 100% just a filler. If the Jets would have seriously been willing to consider him, I think he would have said that maybe he needs to wait things out a little bit more as opposed to jumping on the college offer. But yeah, the same thing. The hell with him, right? How badly do you how badly do you want to compete in 2025 versus wiping our financial but making the retooling faster? I think, and I know where you're going with this, right? Essentially it's one or the other. So I'm going to try to kind of moonwalk out of this a little bit, right? But I think you can say that you can be competitive in 2025 and you won't clearly fix this whole cap situation in 1 year. We're going to have dead cap problems going into probably 2027 with just how we did things between Aaron Rodgers and I don't know what the Devontae Adams stuff looks like. I know he's not guaranteed any money, but I don't know how they really back-ended a lot of these contracts when we went full circle. But we'll probably be in trouble until about 2027 unless we're really just willing to sacrifice what we can do in free agency for the next year or two. And that leads into you mentioning, can we compete or not? But I think when you look at it from the angle, let's say we do go the financial route, I would say being competitive in 2025 probably looks like we have to have another top-tier defense like what we saw before it went off a cliff. And you're talking about us being in a ton of low-scoring games, like 20-13 type wins or losses, or maybe more so likely like 17-10 type games, right? And at that point, you can kind of look at it as a W, and you just expect in 2026 that you'd be able to have some more higher output games from an offensive standpoint. You can pick 25th in the draft in 26 and still find a great quarterback. Yeah, so Drew Aller, you have Sellers, you have Arch Manning. I wouldn't expect that all of these guys will come out right. Part of the game that the agents are going to be trying to predict and kind of play around with is what's going to give a lot of these guys the best chance to really go like top 15, right? The smarter quarterbacks or the smarter free agent agents for some of these quarterbacks, I would argue, like a Nussmeier, they may still want to take a look at trying to get into the draft, even if they might not be able to be in that top 10 conversation, because the further back you go, the better situation you're going to find yourself in, 8 out of 10 times, right? And I look at the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, right? I think they traded up to the 12th or the 13th pick. They had a pretty solid roster, right? They just didn't really have a quarterback that can get them over the hump. Patrick Mahomes ended up turning into that guy. I look at the Eagles with Jalen Hurts. They were able to wait, and I felt like they traded up in the second, but I can't recall. But they were able to wait into the second. And again, the success rate is going to drop as you go down in the draft. But I think it's all about who can put the most functional plan and stick to it around these quarterbacks, granted whatever kind of skill set they have coming out. But that 2026 class is going to be crazy. Appreciate you, my guy. Holy King, 100%. I don't know if we get it next year. I really hope we do. Even if it's an early playoff exit, it would just feel really good to know that we finally reached the playoff. We killed that drought that everybody would be talking about. And it would just be a signal that more things went right in year one under Aaron Glenn, and kind of at least give some vindication into going again the first time defensive coordinator as head coach route and all that kind of stuff. No cousins, aunts, or uncles. Facts. Overall happy with the staff. The offensive line coach is kind of an unknown. He was a really, excuse me, My bad, guys. I've been in meetings and stuff all day. And the kids had me up super late. Yes, biggest unknown. Looks like things cut off a little bit there. I see you continue here. London is kind of a head scratcher. He kind of reminds me of a serviceable coach. Not sure he's the guy to mentor a young quarterback, and the fact that he moved around so much is a question. Yeah, so it's interesting because if you don't like a Scott Turner, for example, and let me just, I know we didn't really touch on a ton of names here, but we'll kind of highlight those in a bit. I'll probably wrap this up in like 15 minutes or so. Where's I going with that? If you don't like names like Scott Turner, if you didn't like the Steve Wilkes hire, for example, guys like Charles London and some of these guys under them that maybe have 4 or 5 years of experience, but they've kind of been like going place to place every year or two. A lot of that, you have to keep it in context of some of the situations. New guys were coming in and they needed to try to push some guys out. And guys are going to want to go with their guys, right? For example, you look at Charles London. Who took over again that we wanted for them? Was it Nick Caley? Yeah, I think Nick Caley landed with the Seahawks, right? He opted to go with, and I don't remember the name. It was like Janikowski or something crazy like that. He had a previous experience with him. I think the offensive coaching staff community is maybe a little bit more tight-knit just because of the fluctuation in success that you can see there maybe than maybe guys on the defensive staff are, but I don't know. James Baker, appreciate you, my guy. Keep going, fam. Grow on the platform. Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, always a big supporter. You guys don't have to. Obviously, I hope the channel gets to this point, this level at some point. But yeah, we're pushing ahead, man. There's still a lot of stuff I need to do, a lot of equipment upgrades and stuff I can make, a lot of guys to reach out to. But we're getting there. It's guys like James, it's guys like Wild Wave and Harlem Born coming over, My Holy King, NJ Lauren, Dark Soldier, all you guys that really kind of stuck out with the beginning. Also, I didn't know a lot of you guys were sharing some of the content. I don't know if it's via Facebook, Twitter and stuff, because I don't really do the social medias. I think that's been a huge driver too. So thank you. Thank you very much. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts there, right? I needed to find the Jets coaching staff, offensively anyways, some names to talk through. While I'm doing that, I was still going through stuff. So what do you think about Ted McMillan at 7 or trade back for more picks? I would be a huge fan of trading back as much as I like Ted McMillan. He is just a more consistent version, which I know that's going to matter, right? But he's really a more consistent version of what we've seen from some of the guys that are going to go later, like your Eric A. Manners. For example, I know and I keep forgetting his name, but Jaden Higgins. He's like another big body guy, right? So I think it really is going to depend on one, what are we looking for? And kind of how do we plan to maximize that, right? I do think a huge plus for us was the fact that we were able to keep Sean Jefferson. So when I look at guys like Garrett Wilson, obviously still having a pretty good connection with him, granted how the season went, I don't know what's going to happen. So it's weird. You spend a 3rd round pick on Malachi Corley. He obviously has a skill set that you should be able to do something with. And whether Sean Jefferson held him back, whether it was just the dysfunction with Woody Johnson and Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers and stuff, nothing made sense about Malachi Corley last year. Aaron Rodgers said he was his favorite receiver in the draft. And I don't think he's usually like a hyperbolic kind of guy with his statements when it comes to like players. It was just really weird all the way around. Dave Canales, thank you. Wow, Wave. That's one of the coaches I was thinking about with the Seahawks. Went to Panthers. I always thought London was here. What? Oh, I always thought London was hired with an eye to keeping Rodgers, that he wouldn't offend Rodgers, could work with him. I don't know if he was hired if the AR decision has been made. Got you, got you, got you. That could be one thing, but I think Aaron Glenn and what we know now, he's been pretty straightforward about we're not catering to Aaron Rodgers. And I'm sure that's a blanket statement that applies to I can't really find the other one they posted is being weird for me. The staff update. Sorry, hold on. I don't know if I think it's a blanket statement is what I'm trying to get to, right? I don't think he's going to be catering to anybody, but most specifically Aaron Rodgers. So when I look at Charles London, we originally wanted the Commanders quarterback coach, David Blow, whatever it is. And I think a lot of that was there was going to be a ton of shared vision in terms of how to use analytics, maybe using some of the VR stuff that I talked about that helped give Jaden Daniels an edge, at least from the stuff that I read up on. And maybe this was the next best guy as somebody he thinks has done a respectable job, but kind of shares some of those same sentiments. I'm a huge UNC Tar Heels fan. I hate that Belichick. I feel what you mean. Me being from Jersey, I'm a big Rutgers guy. So if he was to have joined my Scarlet Knights team, I would be upset. It's all about killing that playoff drought. Yes, but I would also say that pretty much every past regime since Rex Ryan has also tried to do quick solutions to get us to the playoffs just for things to fall apart because it wasn't the proper guys in place that you could really build with, like long term or even short term if you want to talk about like a 2-3 year span, right? Been watching. Appreciate you, my man. Are you originally from the Big Apple? Because I say no. No. DKB are just my initials. I use X because I like anime. So if you see certain animes, they usually have X as kind of like an and joining two things together. I'm from Jersey though. If they cut AR, Adams and Lazard, they cleared the 26 cap. That leaves them with 35 million in 2025 cap space. That is good to know. I know there's a few other moves that could put us. I think it was closer to like the mid 60, low 70 range. And I can't remember if I was listening to Jet Central or maybe it was Badlands or something, but somebody was saying we'd have something ridiculous like 130 million in 2026 or something crazy. So I know it's definitely feasible for us to make a significant amount of space there. I also don't want us to necessarily go breaking the bank though in the first year or two, because really until you figure out who you want your quarterback of the future to be, it's really hard to determine what kind of talents you would necessarily need for, a 2-3 year sample size to pair some of these guys with. So you probably would have to go all out to get you a top tier tight end or to get you another top tier wide receiver, just to kind of have your bases covered and have just a consistent level of talent, right? If Abdul Carter isn't there at 7, trade back. Yeah, I don't think I have anybody that absolutely would need to be on the board for me not to trade back. If anything, I would say that probably raises the value of what the trade back package would need to be. I think people would, again, you could probably get a pretty ridiculous haul for Abdul Carter if he was somehow still there. And you probably only need to go back to like the middle of the first round. But I'm considering everybody, right? A Will Johnson, an Abdul Carter, a Mason Graham. We don't need the tackles, but if you have Simmons with his injury history makes it a little bit tricky. But if you have one of the Michigan guys there, for example, right? I think I would be comfortable moving back with the understanding that you're still going to get a high quality guy. You just might not get the blue chip at the position you wanted at, right? And you can make the argument that D tackle is important, but some people won't consider it a premium position per se, or even if they do, the fact that we have Quinnen may make some people say that, all right, well, now you can wait on this a little bit and maybe choose to just target somebody later. But I'm not really locked into anybody just yet, but I still haven't really gone into any of the draft stuff either. So I probably won't be doing breakdowns for like another month, maybe stuff like that. So I'll have a better idea later, but I'm not locked into anybody needing to be a draft pick right now. Yeah, I talked about the idea of Quentin getting traded. I don't want to see it happen, but we'll see. Dan, you still here? I know you mentioned he was working Wild Wave. I haven't seen him since scrolling through. Yeah, but I think Malachi Corley was held back by the coaching staff, mainly Hackett, who was just a crap. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. It's really weird though, because this has been multiple coaching staffs that don't seem to want to play the young wide receivers. And it doesn't matter how much they talked them up. It doesn't matter how much of a necessary physicality or even skill set that they may bring that you should be able to work with in year one. This is what I would want to see out of this staff, right? Because I would say 90% of the time, any other team in the NFL is going to find a way to play their young guys. You look at Marvin Mims, I think, is a great example from the Broncos. You look at Jalen Hyatt from the Giants, for example. Whatever their bread and butter was that got them drafted is what they used them for in year one. And they gave them opportunities to see if they were still developed, definitely as things expanded going into year 2 or 3. So if Corley can't see the field by next year, it's either just a extreme bust for us or we have a bigger problem on our hands. Brooklyn born in North Carolina. Got you. Nice. Harlem. Got you. I think that with Corley, he didn't fit the dink and duck pass game ridges. I would imagine that's probably where he should have excelled at the most, right? Get him the ball immediately after the snap, right? You could have even used him as a running back a little bit, and I would have been fine with it. But give him his motion passes, give him his manufactured touches, get him the ball behind 5 yards of scrimmage where he can get a little bit of run ability and stuff behind him. He would have found ways to succeed. I strongly think that if in a world, obviously completely different kind of guys, right? But when you have guys like Darren Sproles, or you have your I'm trying to think of the Bills running back that we used to have, Ty Johnson's, right? You have some of these running back that technically can specialize as like receiver hybrid guys. There's ways to incorporate them and find success with them. We just didn't get it done. Rodgers did. He's a vertical guy, not a route runner. Agree, Hackett was a big part. Yeah. Have family ties to the Brunch, lived there for 8-9 years. Bronx, got you. That autocorrect is killing you. The Vikings safety Bynum is a perfect free agent for 2025. I have to look at him. Admittedly, I'm also behind in the free agency class, but this looks like a really good year if you need a safety or a couple of safeties to go and get some. And you won't have to shell out 12, 13, $15 million for these guys. But if you do, I really like a guy like Jeremy Chin, for example. I think he's been super underrated. Has kind of developed into being a bit of a turnover type guy. Still plays really well in the run. I know when I chatted with Ian from Jet Central, and the name's escaping me again, but he really likes Hollins from the Dolphins. So we'll see. I am curious how much we are willing to invest in the back seven, but really good year for safeties. Devontae Adams can get you something back. Just let him have an open window to negotiate his contract. I did see, I think he said Rams. I know he's been flirting with the Packers again. 49ers were out there. And Chargers as well. So I don't know, though. I don't know if we'll really be able to get any trades for any of these guys, and even if the new coaching staff will want to let any of that stuff kind of linger. All right, we will wrap up here soon. I couldn't get the offensive side on, but I will finish running through chat, share any final thoughts and stuff that I have. If Abdul Carter's at 7, sprint to the podium. Yeah, and I wouldn't be mad if you do, but I think there are enough options on the offensive side of the ball that we can target if we picked up some extra draft capital that I would be willing to sacrifice having a guy like Abdul Carter or any of the other guys that I mentioned realistically. But I'm not mad at it if we go and get any of them. So it really is what it is, at least as of right now. I like you doing some live action fam night for sure. I know I don't do it enough, but I also struggle to talk for long lengths of time. Voice gets tired and whatnot. What do you think about Shedeur Sanders? So Shedeur Sanders, I think, offers some high upside. I know I've heard some of the comparisons that sound crazy, like he can have a Joe Burrow level of ascent, at least when it comes to just absolutely destroying a defense if he has the proper, pocket and all that kind of stuff. When I look at him, and I have to go back and look at some more Colorado games because I only seen, a couple of the ones that stood out as, big play matchups. When I look at him, he's a guy that really never plays within structure. He always feels like he's needing to scramble to make a play, even if he doesn't necessarily need to do that. The games where you see him necessarily really calm and he's able to just sit down there, and he kind of gets this I equate it to basketball because that's kind of my primary sport. And being a point guard, when you get kind of really excited, and especially when you're younger and cocky and stuff, and you have a matchup that you should just be beating, you kind of get this little bounce to you, right? Kind of this excited rhythm. When I see that, I know it's going to be a bad game for the defense, but you don't see it a ton. Granted, I think some of the vision that he has is really crazy. I think he can make all the throws. I think people keep trying to knock him for not having this ridiculous level of speed. You don't need it. It helps, but that's what makes guys like Lamar Jackson so special. So I don't know if he would even be a Jalen Hurts or a Kyler Murray type guy per se. But I see him being a reasonable dual threat quarterback that can go out there and put up some numbers. So I think the biggest question mark around Shedeur Sanders is, can you get him to understand the processing better? Can you get him to understand how he should go through his progression and where he should be attacking things? And it's a different conversation even from Zach Wilson, which may sound a little bit similar, right? In terms of some of the question marks there. But it's really, can you get him to understand why we're calling this play, how we want to attack the defense using that play, and then nailing the timing? If he does that consistently, I think you can talk about him being one of the best quarterbacks coming out of that draft. And maybe I don't know what the ceiling for him would be. If you look at Joe Burrow, I think some people will put him maybe third at worst, right? So maybe you say third if he reaches that level is the ceiling for Shedeur Sanders. But I think you're probably talking about a top 8 to 12 range kind of guy. And I would say it's worth betting on something like that. AG is all biz. Yeah, it's one of the things that I love the most about him. I love more of the quiet guys, but just the guys that are super blunt. They get down to business. This is how it is. This is how it's going to be. We don't have a ton of time for feelings. We need to get these results in. Ty Johnson. Yeah, for sure. Final thoughts here. So I couldn't get it up and I didn't want to just show the zoomed out version, but we aren't getting a senior advisor guy, at least as of this time. Again, I mentioned it in the beginning, but I think the rumors out there was that something with Jeff Hadley fell through, and we weren't really able to bring him on board. So Scott Turner, senior assistant, as well as pass game coordinator. So I'm assuming all of the ideas, all of the questions within the coaching staff will really bounce through him. Then you have Jess Blasco, tight ends coach. He's done it before, 3 years at the collegiate level. Nothing super notable, but then he's been an offensive line coach / run game coordinator. Steve Hayden, obviously kind of the inverse, transferring from tight end guy to offensive line. Question marks both there. Don't really understand what the idea is. Sean Jefferson, in my mind, is a plus, if nothing else, for the fact that it probably helps retain Garrett Wilson. But the thing with Sean Jefferson is, and I think this would be the case with pretty much anybody on the offensive side is, right? They've never really stood out in any given year necessarily as just this top tier guy, right? They've been coaches that have done really well for what they've been asked to do, or maybe the talent level they've had. But I wouldn't say you've necessarily really ever excelled. And maybe that's kind of the sticking point here for a lot of people is you don't necessarily have a ton of up and comers that maybe will become the next big thing, right? Engstrand really gives us our best shot at that. Charles London, quarterback coach, already spoken on that. Nick McKissick, Luke. I don't remember what school he's coming from, but the running back coach from the collegiate level, never been in the NFL. I won't knock the running back one as much. And I know he hasn't really produced any like superstar studded caliber running back guys. But I mean, I don't really know what to tell you. Nobody ever really looks at the running back coach in my mind anyways and says that, that's a really good one. It feels like the transition from, and I've heard Derrick Henry speak about this before. He almost felt like it was easier going to the NFL, going from college. I don't feel like running back coach really gets as much credit for the job that they're doing. So it's probably easier for him to come in and maybe make a name for himself, right? Breece Hall goes crazy next year. Braylon Allen maybe gets close to putting up, 600-700 yards, contributes on the ground. You get something out of Isaiah Davis. Like, we'll look at it and say that was a win. And then you have some of the assistants. So Walter Kuzmirik, Junior Taylor are two guys that we actually kept from Robert Saleh's regime. And then I think Brian Natkin, who is the assistant offensive line coach, is also relatively new. So again, question marks for sure, but I'm not going to knock anything until we start seeing what happens with, these offseason practices and everything. On paper, it's not spectacular, but I would probably say overall, you're looking at maybe a C- to like a C+ grade. That's kind of what I would have to put my stamp on it as of now. And we'll see if things get better. Final comments here. One of the things I am most happy about is Spillman. Yes, that was a huge win for us. Woody went after him. He was happily retired, so he won't be afraid to push back on Woody and his kid. Yeah, for sure. I know that'll probably continue to be a talking point overall. And I heard a couple people say this, and I think it is the best comparison. We now have our version of Chris Spillman, who's with the Lions. He's a guy that essentially reports directly to Woody. He's in charge of restructuring our front office personnel, and he has all the connections, experience, et cetera, to really get it done. So huge thing. Who are your top 5 QBs in the NFL to wrap things up? Top 5. Let's see. I would probably say at 1. So I think what Mahomes pulled off this year still deserves the respect of saying he looks like the top guy, even regardless of what the Super Bowl ended up looking like. I would say next is Josh Allen, especially after this year, because we've seen him do the most with less. And I always felt like, and this feels like it's also kind of a trend that happens. You look at Calvin Johnson, you look at Stephon Diggs, you look at Steve Smith, for example. When guys had these certain caliber number 1 type receiver guys that they kind of leaned on too much, when that was taken away or they had to move on from that, they seem to really found a way to like elevate their game, right? So Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, I would say I would take Joe Burrow for how consistent he's been over Lamar Jackson, but it's close. So Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Jackson, and then I would probably say now, um, I would honestly probably say Matthew Stafford is fifth for me. You could look at the younger guys and put it up there and say like Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, whatever. I would be perfectly fine with whatever the argument turns into with that. But I would say Matthew Stafford probably is my fifth. He's a guy that also has been vastly underrated for a while, right? And I think you see him not only developing Puka and turning him into a success, obviously was able to go out there and make Jesus Christ. What's the slot receiver they're trying to trade again? Nonetheless, you guys know what I mean. He's been able to go out there and make it happen. He's developed tight ends. He's developed wide receivers. He's gotten running backs on track. I think that would be my top five as the guys that have done the best in the NFL so far. So nice. Cooper Kupp. Yes, thank you. Yeah, my brain's fried. Well, I appreciate you guys. I didn't know I was going to end up doing the stream this long, ironically enough, but thank you guys for coming through. This actually, I think it broke records for me too. I've had the most amount of people in here at once than I've had at any point doing like an individual stream. So thank everybody and anybody that has watched for the support. And stay tuned. Again, I plan on finding some free time. I'll work on getting the equipment. I'll be able to upgrade some stuff. I actually have a friend who's pretty good at analytics, so I'm hoping he can help me out on the fly here and there with like some charts and different things like that we look at for some of these conversations. But hopefully you all, whether you're working, got a free off day, whatever the case is, enjoys the rest of your day. And I'll catch up with you guys again. Hopefully I can put one stream a week back on the radar or something for me. But pleasure chatting it up with you all, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.